this out of the way so I don't splatter it everywhere. The subcommittee will come to order. Good afternoon, everybody. We've called this markup to order today to consider 4 important measures that touch on pressing challenges the United States faces in the Asia-Pacific region. After the conclusion of this brief business meeting, we'll proceed immediately to our scheduled hearing on the administration's fiscal year 2018 state and foreign operations budget request for the East Asia and Pacific region. Pursuant to notice, we have 4 bipartisan measures on our agenda this afternoon. As members were notified yesterday, it is the intention of the chair to consider today's business in block so that we can proceed promptly to our hearing. All members may have 5 days to insert remarks into the record and without objection. The following measures and amendments will be considered in block. House Resolution 422, urging adherence to the one country, two-system policy as prescribed in the joint declaration between the government of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and the government of the People's Republic of China on the question of Hong Kong. House Resolution 445, honoring the life and legacy of Liu Xiaobo for his steadfast commitment to the protection of human rights, political freedoms, free markets, democratic elections, government accountability, and peaceful change in the People's Republic of China. And Sherman Amendment 20 to H Resolution 445. H.R. 2732, the North Korea Travel Control Act, with Sherman Amendment 21 in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 2732, and H.R. 3320, to direct the Secretary of State to develop a strategy to regain observer status for Taiwan in the World Health Organization and for other purposes. Before turning to our ranking member, I recognize myself to speak on today's business. H Resolution 422, introduced by Ranking Member Engel, will help draw greater attention to recent developments in Hong Kong, where actions by the government of China have interfered in Hong Kong's autonomy and caused the civil liberties and caused a chill in civil liberties. The erosion of the one country, two systems policy threatens to destroy what makes Hong Kong unique and vibrant, so I commend the ranking member for introducing this legislation. Congressman Meadows' H Resolution 445, honoring the life of Liu Xiaobo, is a fitting way for the Congress to pay its respect to this remarkable proponent of democracy and Nobel Prize winner. Liu's widow, Liu Zi, remains detained by the agents of the Chinese government, raising the same concerns about access to quality medical care that have been implicated in her husband's death while he was in prison. Ranking Member Sherman's amendment will strengthen the resolution as it relates to Li Shi, and I am proud to support this amendment as well as the underlying text. Congressman Schiff's North Korea Travel Control Act will be an important way for Congress to refine the administration's recently announced policy of banning travel to North Korea. I'm looking forward to sending this along to the full committee with the fixes made by Ranking Member Sherman's substitute amendments so we can get this important policy right. Finally, H.R. 3320 responds to Taiwan's disinvitation from the World Health Assembly this year. U.S. efforts led Taiwan's inclusion over the last several years, and Taiwan punches above its weight in the fight against global disease. Unfortunately, China has taken a short-sighted policy to expel Taiwan from this forum and restricts its overall international space. This legislation will update U.S. law on Taiwan's participation in the WHO to improve our strategy to promote Taiwan's place in the world health. I now recognize our ranking member, Mr. Sherman, for any remarks he may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased that we have in front of us 4 excellent bills and that they are bipartisan, as the work of our committee usually is. I support all 4 bills, namely the ones regarding Hong Kong, China, North Korea, and Taiwan. I'm a co-sponsor of all 4. The first bill, H.Res. 422, urges autonomy for Hong Kong that is consistent with the one country, two systems policy. It is critical that we send a strong message to China that we value our relationship with Hong Kong and that our relations with the People's Republic will suffer if the PRC seeks to interfere with the democratic processes in Hong Kong. The second bill, H-Res 445, honors the life and legacy of Liu Xiaobo for his commitment to human rights and political freedoms in China. Liu received the Nobel Peace Prize in 2010, and he died, unfortunately, earlier this month while serving an 11-year prison sentence and died in part due to inadequate medical care. My amendment to this bill seeks protection for Mrs. Liu Xie, the widow of Mr. Liu. This amendment urges the United States government to continuously advocate for Liu Xie's release when meeting with Chinese authorities. It arises from suggestions from our colleague, Congressman Levin. The third bill is H.R. 2732, the North Korea Travel Control Act, which requires travel restrictions on travel to North Korea. This bill is authored by Representative Schiff and Joe Wilson and includes provisions that will prevent tourist travel while allowing limited legitimate travel to North Korea. I, as you noted in your opening statement, Mr. Chairman, have an amendment in the nature of a substitute to this bill that I believe reflects the consensus of the leadership of both this subcommittee and our full committee. The State Department has also announced that it will have a policy to heavily restrict travel to North Korea. The State Department is correct to restrict travel to North Korea and, in effect, eliminate tourism to North Korea. However, we should make sure that aid workers, journalists, NGOs, and experts are able to travel to North Korea when they can, especially if they can shed light on conditions there, and we should allow travel when circumstances allow. It is doubtful that we can enact this legislation in time for so that it goes into effect before the State Department's restrictions go into effect. So I hope this bill will serve as a strong statement to the State Department that they need to make sure in their action, and it'll be their action that will govern at least for a while, ensure that humanitarian relief workers, journalists, and some other limited categories of travelers, to include people traveling for family reunions, may travel to North Korea when appropriate. Finally, the fourth bill, H.R. 3320, asks the Secretary of State to develop a strategy to regain observer status for Taiwan in the World Health Organizations. This is important for world health. You can't exclude a country like Taiwan for political reasons if you're concerned with fighting disease that affects people all over the world. And our chairman has also indicated why this bill is important. So I would hope that we would ultimately move to adopt my two amendments and then to pass en bloc all four of these bills with the support of this subcommittee to the full committee, and I would yield back.
I thank the ranking members for his comments, and we'll next go to Mr. Steve Shabbat from Ohio.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And the measures being considered today are both timely and important. First of all, I'd like to speak on H.Res. 422, urging China to adhere to the one country, two systems policy with respect to Hong Kong. The United States-Hong Kong relationship runs deep. Unfortunately, it has become abundantly clear in recent years that China is taking systematic steps to limit and restrict the autonomy of Hong Kong and its people. Less than 2 weeks ago, 4 legislators were disqualified from serving on Hong Kong's Legislative Council, or LegCo. All of these disqualified members represent new political parties that support greater autonomy for Hong Kong and self-determination of the city's future relationship with China. To add insult to injury, they are expected to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in fees for the government's legal costs. This development, to me, reeks of China's central government attempting to purge the LegCo of its pro-democracy members. Now, none of this is really surprising. However, it emphasizes the importance of our support for the original agreement that was struck between the UK and China as it pertains to Hong Kong. That is exactly what I stand with my colleagues who worked on HRES 422 as we together we want to ensure that China adheres to the one country, two systems policy and respects the rights of our brave friends in Hong Kong. Lastly, I'd like to voice my support for H.R. 3320. I'm also a sponsor of. This bill requires that the State Department develop a strategy for Taiwan to regain its inclusion in the World Health Organization. Taiwan is an important contributor to global health and has provided great research and development to help combat some of the world's worst diseases. I believe it would behoove our partners around the world to give Taiwan a seat at the table, at the very least. And I'll add that almost 20 years ago, I introduced the first WHO Taiwan resolution, HJ-Res 126, along with my colleague then, Representative Sherrod Brown. Not sure whatever happened to him. He's over in the Senate now. I've long supported Taiwan's participation at the WHO, and I'm proud to be showing that continued support today. I would also mention that relative to Taiwan, way back in the day, my friend and colleague, Mr. Rohrabacher, and I were the two Republicans who were co-founders of the Congressional Taiwan Caucus, along with two Democrats, one being that other guy from Ohio, Sherrod Brown, that I just mentioned, and Bob Wexler, Robert Wexler from Florida. The four of us started that, and here at least the two of us still are. So,
We're getting old.
for those who couldn't heard, Mr. Rohrabacher commented that he and I are both getting old, and he's right. Okay, yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate your comments. Ms. Perry, do you have any comments? Then we'll next go and recognize Mr. Joe Wilson from the great state of South Carolina.
Thank you, Chairman Ted Yoho, for your leadership and for the opportunity to speak before the committee today on H.R. 2732, the North Korea Travel Control Act. When Congressman Adam Schiff and I introduced this bipartisan legislation in May, Otto Warmbier was still being held illegally by the tyrannical regime in North Korea. In the weeks following, a tragedy unfolded. Otto, a UVA student, returned to the United States, but in a coma from which he never recovered. Sadly, Otto's story, while tragic, is not unique. Otto was one of 17 Americans detained by North Korea in the last 10 years. 3 are still being held. I have traveled to North Korea on a congressional delegation in 2003, led by the former Congressman Kurt Weldon, which had been invited to the city of Pyongyang after Baghdad had been liberated, getting the attention of the dictator. While there, I saw firsthand how every dollar in North Korea, including the revenue from tourism, goes toward subjugation of its citizens and toward the very weapons development program it uses to threaten American families. Additionally, the regime also has no reservations about illegally detained Americans as bargaining chips in an attempt to score credibility on the world stage. However, despite the risk and despite knowing how the regime uses tourist revenue, Western tourism to the regime is increasing, even knowing they could be incarcerated. It is time that we enact meaningful restrictions on tourist travel to totalitarian North Korea, and I urge the passage of this legislation. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. The chair will now recognize Mr. Connolly from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to the ranking member, Mr. Sherman, for bringing these bills to the subcommittee for its consideration today. These measures reinforce long-standing U.S. foreign policy with respect to Taiwan and Hong Kong, protect U.S. citizens from the risks of travel to North Korea, and honor a giant of the Chinese human rights movement who will not be forgotten, Liu Xiaobo. I'd like to talk in particular about 2 of the 4 measures. I support all 4. H.R. 3320, to direct the Secretary of State to develop a strategy to regain observer status for Taiwan in the World Health Organization. As co-chair of the Congressional Taiwan Caucus, I particularly want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for introducing H.R. 3320 and for inviting me to be an original co-sponsor of this bill, which recognizes Taiwan's long-standing participation in the World Health Organization and works to improve the U.S. strategy for promoting Taiwan's observer status going forward. Public health should not be a political football. Taiwan's meaningful participation in the World Health Assembly is in the best interest not only of the people of Taiwan, but of the entire international community. Taiwan's been a critical partner in numerous global health issues, including the Ebola crisis, and the United States should continue its support of Taiwan's engagement with the World Health Organization and other international organizations to address global health and disease prevention needs. The spread of diseases, especially our concern about endemic viruses that could cross boundaries in a second, does not respect political delineations. And Taiwan is no different. We need Taiwan's help and participation in the full international health community. The second bill I wanted to address, Mr. Chairman, is H.R. 2732. I also am co-chair of the Korea Caucus, and also glad to be an original co-sponsor of H.R. 2732, the North Korea Travel Control Act. The North Korean regime's fatal exploitation of a Virginia student, college student, Otto Warmbier, demonstrates the extreme risk facing any American who visits that rogue state. During the past 2 years, Kim Jong-un's regime has arrested 3 other Americans, including another Virginian, Kim Dong-chul, who remain in detention today. This bill protects U.S. citizens from the risk of travel to North Korea by restricting travel that would pose an imminent danger to the public health or the physical safety of the United States travelers. The legislation provides important exceptions for several travel purposes, including professional reporters, compelling humanitarian considerations, official U.S. government travel, official intergovernmental organizational business, family reunifications, or other licenses issued by the United States Treasury Department. I urge adoption of all 4 measures before us, and I thank the Chair and Ranking Member for their consideration and support.
Thank you, Mr. Connolly, for the comments. Hearing no further requests for recognition, the question occurs on approving the items considered in block. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, a clarification. We're adopting my 2 amendments and
Thank you for that clarification.
thank you.
The question occurs on approving all items considered in block, including all amendments. And again, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chairs, the ayes have it, and the items considered in block are agreed to. Without objection, the measure considered in block are ordered, favorably reported to the full committee as amended, and the staff is directed to make any technical conforming changes. That includes the markup. The subcommittee stands adjourned.
Okay.
Yeah, right now. We're going to give the media 2 minutes to pack up, and we'll start the full committee, or the subcommittee hearing.